Hello, podcast fam. I am thrilled to share some exciting news. My book, So Grow Lead, is officially live on Amazon. This book is more than just my story of starting a nonprofit and building a peanut butter factory in Malawi. So trust me, the ups and downs of that journey are worth the read. It's also packed with practical strategies to help nonprofit leaders like you tackle challenges with clarity, courage, and a whole lot of heart. If you've ever wondered how to turn your vision into reality, navigate the inevitable hurdles, and build something meaningful, whether in your organization or in your own life, this book is for you. I'd be so grateful for your support in spreading the word. Grab your copy of So Grow Lead in the show notes and on Amazon today. Let's keep sowing seeds of impact together. Are you a nonprofit professional who's feeling overwhelmed and burnt out? Well, welcome to the Lead with Heart podcast. I am your host, Haley Cooper. On this podcast, we will share stories of leadership, courage, and empathy that'll help you learn to take care of yourself, your staff, organization, and community. You will hear from nonprofit leaders who have been in your shoes and have learned best practices to raise more revenue and make a greater impact. Let's thrive together. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Lead with Heart podcast. This is your host, Haley Cooper, and I am so excited today to have Yulia Zhernovaya on the podcast. Thank you so much for being here. I feel like I say this every single time, but we met over LinkedIn, and I just really appreciate your vulnerability, your honesty on the podcast and what you're all about. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about Yulia before we dive into our conversation about how technology can help break down silos and allow you to accomplish your mission. She serves as the head of operations and strategy at Giveffect, the leading all-in-one nonprofit software. Built for nonprofits, big and small, Giveffect's connected technology creates one source of truth and includes CRM, fundraising, events, online donations, offline gift tracking, volunteer management, donor management, marketing tools, and more. Where were you when I was a director of development? I needed something all in one. Yulia came to this role with over 10 years of international work experience. She worked in Japan, the Philippines, US, in international relations, operations, and business strategy. She aims to translate her passion for technology into the nonprofit sector and demonstrate how technology can make our work more human. In her role, Yulia helps nonprofit leaders take control of their technology to unify their organizations, eliminate manual work, and raise more money. As an outcome, nonprofits move past the way things have always been done so people can do what they do best, human to human work. Yulia is involved with a variety of professional organizations, most notably serving as a board member of the Young Nonprofit Professionals Network of New York City. Well, welcome. I'm so glad you're here.
Yeah, Haley, thank you so much for having me. We've been connecting on LinkedIn for a while, and I've been such a huge fan of your content and also of your podcast. So it's an honor to be here. And again, thank you for having me.
So can you tell me a little bit more about your work and your experience and what led you to Giveffect and the work that you do today?
Yeah, absolutely. So in my career, I've done a couple of things and work in different industries. So my journey started I learned languages in university, English and Japanese, and it opened some really great opportunities for me to start my career. My first job was working for government in Japan, and living in Japan and working there, that's really where I realized the importance of technologies. To give you a little bit of background, when I was working for government, part of my job was to organize events. Very similar to fundraising or a program type of work. We've been doing a lot of in-person events. But at that time, everything was analog. So when I think back 10 years ago, every time we had an event, we've been sending emails one by one. We've been making these flyers to bring awareness to our events and gather the public. And since it was my first job, I didn't really know anything better. So I think, okay, this is the way we do it. So I'm just going to go with it. And looking back, I think we could have accomplished so much more with technologies that at our disposal right now. But unfortunately, it wasn't the case. After that job, I actually found a new job at the third largest retailer in the world. And that's where I really learned how technology can make us more efficient so we can focus on human to human work. So again, in my work, I had very great tools that could automate anything from hiring, inventory management. So I, as a store manager, can be on the floor and actually talk and with customers and work with customers and do what only humans can do. So that experience really shaped the way I look at technologies. And I think it can be translated and utilized in for profit and nonprofit space. Technology can really make us more efficient, more productive, and help us to build relationships and work on a mission instead of doing manual work. So that brings me to Giveffect. When I came across the organization, I was immediately drawn by mission and the work they do with nonprofit because it combined my passion for technology and just my desire to give back to the community. To give you a little bit background of Giveffect, also, it's a nonprofit software. And basically, at the core of the company is creating technology that could help and automate work of nonprofit leaders so they focus on what they came to nonprofit to do in the first place is delivering services, bringing more awareness to the cause, and working with people instead of working on the data.
Yes, I love that. And thank you so much for sharing your experience and what really drove you to understanding technology and the value that it has in the workplace to allow you to do more human to human work. And I love that perspective because generally when you think of technology, like I think of like how this is a silly example, but like McDonald's now, like you can go and check out and you don't even need that human to human contact anymore. So when I think of technology, I think of it taking away that human aspect of relationships, but it's not necessarily like that. So how can, I think nonprofits are historically bad at tracking data. They focus so much on that human to human work, but part of doing that is tracking that data because that allows you to pivot and understand, is this program working? Is this fundraising working? Like how to then go and be better and deliver on your mission. So can you talk a little bit about like how we can better utilize that data and not have that mindset of, oh, I'm going to have to sit behind a computer and take away what I came to this nonprofit to do. And yeah, can you expand a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you raised such an important point. I think when I talk to nonprofit leaders and I ask why they came to work for nonprofit, I never hear anyone say, oh, I just love manual data entry. And that's why I choose this work. Nonprofit leaders, the most passionate and about their cause and dedicated people that I know about. But at the same time, if we look at the different researches, it says that at least 30% of the work spent on administrative tasks. And nonprofit is the third biggest employer in the United States. And there are about 16 million people work in the nonprofit. So if we think about all the work, all the manual work, all the administrative tasks that are done on a daily basis and how much it takes away from what people came to do in nonprofit in the first place is just shocking sometimes, to say the least. So data tracking is very, very important. And as you mentioned, it's important to make informed decision, but also overall align the team and foster collaborations. So I think there are a couple of things I wanted to touch upon when it comes to data tracking. A lot of times when I speak to nonprofit leaders, they talk about they want to see everything in one place, right? They want to look at Haley and be able to see how much you support the organization in one profile. Yet a lot of time there are this siloed dispatch technologies that don't allow to do that. Just last week, I was talking with, not this week, I was talking to an organization and they exactly in this situation. And they told me that they have a part-time employee who would come in every week and all they do is entering data from multiple systems and one profile. So it not only not helpful to make informed decision, but it also affects where and how you allocate your already scarce resources.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And I've totally been in that position where like I have the donation platform where you receive donations. I have the CRM, I have an email list, and they don't translate. They don't all go together. And there can be information that gets lost in translation. And I know, especially as my job as a fundraiser, like I need to track that history. I need to track that data of a donor to make sure that, because there's so many times I've been given an Excel spreadsheet and been like, here, go talk to someone. And I'm like, I literally don't know how long they've been in the organization. Sure, I have a little bit of their gift history, but it's hard my favorite part is always building relationships. And it's hard to do that if you don't have that piece of data. And I know on the program side, it's always you need data for grants, but it's always hard to track it and track the stories and things like that. So I love what you said is it can like not only make informed decisions, but really help collaborate across teams. And that is what I'm all about so that we can like know that we're working towards a common goal. And again, making those informed decisions as a team, if you know what's working and what's not. So can you talk a little bit more about like the power of technology and how it can bridge that gap and break down those silos?
Yeah, absolutely. So one is just helping to spend less time on the meetings, but more analyzing the data. Another thing I wanted to point out is that technology can help overall institutional collaboration, but also institutional knowledge. As turnover is one of the biggest challenges in the nonprofit world. And a lot of time when someone leaves the organization, they take all of the knowledge with them and you don't have that data. To your point is I had a conversation when someone was hired for a major gift officer role and was given a phone number of the donor. And turned out the donor donated significant amount of money to the organizations and was never thanked or invited on any of the events. So it was very challenging role to step in for that person. But this is exactly why technology needs to be implemented. So you can track all the information in one place and anyone, if they leave the organization, other people can still access that information and work together on moving the needle forward versus starting over every time we have a turnover or someone gets promoted.
Yeah, I think that's so important because I think so many people experience that. Like I've experienced that in almost every nonprofit I've been to. And then having to implement those systems of this is how we track data and this is the importance. And my first podcast episode talks about succession planning and like planning for the future because your job doesn't end with you. It ends with the organization and ultimately the people you're serving. And that's why it's so important to utilize technology so that if and when you move on, like the organization still is able to move towards its mission. And my question for you is a lot of nonprofits, one, are hesitant to invest in technology because obviously there's a dollar sign, but also there's a lot of to-do lists and people are very reactive and moving forward and not really understanding that mindset of forward thinking of if I record this now, this is how it's going to set me up for success or the person that comes after me for success later. So what do you say to those people who are like, I'm in way over my head with my job. I don't have time to add this on to my to-do list and then train my team on this and make sure that they're doing it. What do you say to those people who are hesitant because it adds that extra layer of to-do list?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I completely understand. I agree with you completely. I think one of the two major barriers when it comes to adopting a technology is one is what is called nonprofit starvation cycle, where you know that to be successful as an organization, you need to invest in human capital or in technology, yet you are punished, I would say it, for overhead, and you're only rewarded for the output, right? But for you to produce the output, you need to invest upfront to some of those areas. So that's one of the reasons. The second reason is you mentioned that just fear of change. This is how the things are done, and it's just easier to keep doing what we're doing versus there is a big fear of changing, switching, learning curve, and so on. So I think both are extremely important, but I think in reality, it looks more scarier than it actually is in reality. I think what's important to do before you even start looking for any technologies is doing internal audit, internal discussion. And especially, I know there is a lot of conversation of having technology audit, but what I always recommend to do is doing manual work audit. What are we actually spending time on? How many time is spent on, I don't know, reconciling the gifts or creating email letter? Not even creating a newsletter, but how much time is spent to creating the audience and then downloading, uploading that information. So my rough estimate is at least 30%, and many times it's up to 50% of the time. So we think about all of these hours versus spending 2 months into implementing new technologies. I know it's hard to pause and do that, but in the long run, the benefits might be so much greater than what we're getting right now. So I would say that always start with the audit, realize how much time is spent right now versus how much time can be saved in the future, but also what can we do with that time? Where this time can be spent, calling donors, inviting them to lunches, getting to know your volunteers, getting to know your clients. What would be the outcome of implementing technologies? And my second point is, and I think a lot of, I'm going to be straightforward here. I think a lot of technology companies are responsible for these fears because I do hear sometimes very horror stories, even still now, about migrating the data and it takes 6 to 8 months, or having a very long onboarding process, or getting the data and it's very messy and then organization have to spend time. All of this real and true, and unfortunately sometimes happens, but that's why I think it's important to choose the right partner, but also have a very clear expectations. Keep your technology partner accountable. Know exactly what would be the timeline so you can account maybe when you can do the transition and possibly learn it.
Yeah, I love that idea about time audits. And I have a few podcast episodes coming up about talking about auditing your time and like looking at where you spend your time. And I think that's a great way to, I almost want to say, sell it to your board, right? Like boards want to see that you're spending your time and your money wisely because ultimately you want to raise more revenue to accomplish your mission. And if you're spending your time over here, like not being very efficient, then that's not going to help you raise more revenue. If you put the front end work on front loading it and making sure that you have those systems and policies in place to raise more revenue, it's less cost in the long run. And I'm assuming that you would make, I know from my own experience, you make up that cost because you have more freedom and time to do what your job description is meant to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm actually going through this exercise right now with one of the nonprofits I'm working with, where to convince the board to make this investment upfront. We're doing exercise, making a log of as many tasks as possible and calculating how much they would spending time right now on doing every of other tasks, and then replicating in Giveffect and showing that same task how many minutes or hours they would be spent in Giveffect. So then we can compare and show where this time can be now allocated.
Yeah, I love that idea. And I think another thing is the fear of change, but also the fear of implementation of something new. And I was doing this within my own business. Like I need better project management tools.
Mm-hmm.
And so I invested in one, and it's helped me like map out my workflow and map it out to my clients. And I found out a system of like how to manage people within a new project management system. But I think a lot of people get that fear of accountability or like having to hold other people accountable when implementing new technology. So what do you advise people on as they're onboarding new technology to like make sure that everyone on the team understands how it works? It works for them because each person obviously like the way project management works for me might not work for you.
Absolutely.
In my brain, it might like I like it one way, you might like it color coded another way. So how do you advise people to like onboard it on a team and then hold each other accountable to make sure that what you said you were going to implement
Mhm.
is actually being done?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think I just wanted to add it a little bit more, even before we start implementing technologies, right? We talk a little bit about doing this audit of manual work. But on top of that, right, I think it's also really important to audit all of your technologies, audit all of your programs, and what are you trying to achieve? And at the core of it all should be your mission, values, and what are you trying to do as an organization. The most successful implementation I've seen, we have this one client who used to have 7 different tools and they couldn't even keep up with passwords, not to mention with the data. So a lot of data were in all of these different areas, and no one could really look at a one supporter and understand how they support the organization. Donor information in one place, volunteer information they use to track manually, literally on a piece of paper. And there was very, very questionable data integrity. So what they did is one is, as I mentioned, that audit of manual work, but also surveying the entire organization and teams and understanding what are the priorities for them, coming up with the list of must have versus good to have, and then only starting any types of conversation with any of the tools. So now, when we're talking to different possible partners, I think a couple of things is important to do is, and I always recommend, one is trial. When you hop on the call and you're looking at the technology or you're looking at the website, it might look very appealing to you. But to your point, Haley, everyone is different and every organization has their own needs. So when you actually use the technology, it might not be solving all of the goals that you have in mind. So having that trial experience, I think, is very important to before you before you commit to anything to actually try and play with it. The second thing, I would highly suggest not signing up for multi-year contracts. I was actually very surprised coming to this industry to realize that a lot of nonprofits signing up for 3+ years of service, which is part of it. I understand that it can bring some potential savings in terms of the contract, but at the same time, you're committing for a very long relationships. And in case it doesn't work for you, it can be very painful to switch or get out of the system and so on. And my other recommendations to everyone is always ask for reference. Nothing compares to actually talking with another organization, hopefully the organization who does something similar that you do, and ask for their experience and if it's working for them or not.
Imagine a fundraising partner that not only helps you raise more money, but also supports you in retaining your donors. A partner that helps you raise funds both online and on location so you can grow your impact faster. That's DonorBox, a comprehensive suite of tools, services, and resources that give fundraisers just like you a custom solution to tackle your unique challenges, helping you achieve the growth and sustainability your organization needs, helping you help others. Visit donorbox.org to learn more. Yes, that is great advice. And thank you so much for that candidness. I do have another question for you regarding the project management. And my question is about, and I don't know if you've navigated this, but across generations, because I just had a phone call with someone I work with, and we have a new client we're onboarding, and they've been there for 30 years, and they've tracked their grants on paper or on a whiteboard or like sticky notes, right? Like they don't have a system in place, and they're getting ready to retire, but they're going to have to bring on a younger person into that role who is more familiar with technology, because I didn't have technology until I was like in my 20s, but or like high school. But there's new generations who are so used to technology, and old ones who are like, this is the way we've always done it. We've done it manually in Excel spreadsheet. It works for me. Like, how have you navigated implementing technology across generations? Or if you've come up with that in terms of, I don't want to have to say selling Giveffect to different generations, but I think people view technology in a different way.
Yeah, I think in my experience, I actually have a little bit of backwards experience where I work with an organization and they tell me, because at the end of the day, Giveffect would be used by donors or volunteers. And sometimes there are some reservations in terms of, well, we have more senior volunteers. Would they be, how easy it would be for them to use certain sign up for volunteer opportunities or donate and so on. But from my experience, don't underestimate generations. I see a lot of users from different age groups adapting to technology very easily. I think it really depends on how intuitive and user-friendly technology is. And we always work with our partners to create some content and make it easier for them to, if it's ever needed, to explain it to a certain audience. But what I see on the other hand is a little bit of the internal conflict within the organizations, to your point, when there is still leadership who's been leading an organization for a long time and they used to think the way they are. And now there are younger generations who are coming in and they're advocating for new technologies, implementing of project management systems or other potential other tools, right, to make work more efficient, faster, and get the results. I think it's a great transformation. I think it's a breath of fresh air. And I just always hope that younger generation they have a lot of power to implement those technologies within their organizations because they can lead to greater changes. But one thing I wanted to mention that a lot of technologies don't always mean that it's good for organization. For the past couple of years, the market has exploded with a lot of different tools, project management tools, donor management tools, accepting crypto, accepting all of these different types of donations. And it's great, but I always advise everyone to be very cautious how much technologies and different technologies we implement. There was a very interesting study by Harvard Business Review about the stress caused by using different applications, technologies. And they say that on average, it takes us a couple of seconds to adjust moving from one application to another. And on average, it takes about 4 hours a week for average person just to adjust moving from one application to another. And every year we spend 9% of our working time just adjusting. So the more different windows we have, the more technologies, the more applications we have, the more complicated the process can become, but also it does give us a little bit of stress that we don't really realize.
Yes, I love that point, that being more efficient, not only for your organization, but for yourself internally as well. I want to shift the little conversation a little bit to something you said earlier about data integrity. And I know that that is so important. I've seen some organizations have their data hacked or, have data not properly inputted. And I also think as we're moving more to hybrid situations, like you're not necessarily in the office managing your data, right? You have it in a place, but I think it can be a little bit harder to navigate that data integrity. So how does Giveffect or technology in general allow for that data integrity across an organization and that data confidentiality and making sure that it's used for the purpose that it's supposed to be used for?
Yeah, absolutely. We are all acquiring so much data right now in personal and work life. So this is becoming a really, really big issue. And I think it's very important first with all the partners that you work with and make sure that they are compliant and make sure to understand where they store the data and how data is protected. This is really important point to check. But then the other point is, again, and that's one of the reasons why Giveffect was created as one system in opposed of having separate tools, is that when you have different applications and different tools for different purposes, your data essentially spread across so many different platforms. And that's also concern for security. So having one central location for all of your data might be very important consideration as we move forward. So in Giveffect, we're a cloud-based solution. So we store all of our data on the cloud and essentially we put all data in one bucket, but we're just storing the data. We're not owning the data. The data is all of our clients. And that's very important point for us to make the data protection.
Yes, I love that. And thank you so much for sharing that of like how it can get lost when there are multiple technologies that you're using because it's harder to manage one and it's harder to keep that data in
And
one
not
place.
and not only not even data privacy, but every time we transfer the data, it will lead to it will be most likely a manual process. So every time we're all humans, we do human errors. So when we have this workflows, when we transfer data manually, there is a possibility always to lose some important data, just not being able to transfer it. And then again, looking at our supporters, donors, or volunteers, we might be losing an important part of understanding who they are, why they're supporting our organizations, and we might not be implementing the right strategies to engage with them.
And I think this is such an important conversation to have now to help people be more proactive because I've seen nonprofits like get their data breached or something has gone wrong and then they go into go mode where they're like, oh, we should have done this, this, and this. Where it's like, you could have implemented this. You never know what you don't know and what's not. Like, you would never expect a nonprofit to be breached, but like setting up those policies and procedures and making sure you have all of your data in check and all of that in check beforehand so that when if something happens, which you would hope it wouldn't, right? You have that security in place that you can then reach out to your donors and reassure them that everything's going to be okay. And
absolutely.
So I feel like we've had a lot of great conversation around this, and I've learned a lot about how technology can help break down silos and allow you to do more human to human work. Is there anything else that you would share about like the use of technology and how it can help achieve your mission?
Yeah, I think one couple of things that I wanted to mention, and one I think is very important when we talk about like healthy cultures and how technology relates to that. I think one thing is when I think about healthier culture, for me, it's the culture in which the mission, value, and principles are consistently lived across the organization. But it should be not only front facing towards our donors, volunteers, clients, funders, and community, but also internally. We need to follow the same rules and to hold ourselves accountable. And I think technology can play a really important part in it. To give you an example, I think a lot if an organization says that one of their principles is transparency, yet as a grant manager, for me to write an application, I can get access to the data and I need to ask all of these different teams for the data. I think that really goes against our principles and values. If we say that our principle is collaboration, yet everyone use all of these different tools and work in silence, it also can potentially harm overall culture in the nonprofit. And if we say we're working on our principles innovation, but yet we are using 20 years old technologies, leads to the same issue. So I think it's just really important to I know mission, values, and principles are extremely important for any organizations, including nonprofits, but I really always encourage everyone to look inwards and see how it's affect our cultures.
That is such a good place to end. I think people have a lot of internal work to do. And I love that idea of do your core values apply both internally and externally? And how are you really living up to that mission? Where can people find you and follow along and learn more about the work that you do?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm trying to be more active as I go. So please reach out and I'll be happy to connect.
Well, I will link to that in the show notes. And thank you so much for being here. This has been such a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
If you have valued these stories or learned something from what you've heard, please share this podcast episode or follow me on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for your support, and together we can build a better community and world.